How's it going, everyone? It's Avi from Weather Sponge 1000, and in this video we're going to focus on this tropical disturbance coming off the African coast, which has a higher possibility of developing into Tropical Storm Danielle within the next 5 days. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. So let's begin by taking a look at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook provided from the National Hurricane Center. And here is this disturbance we're watching now coming off the African coast, and you see that within the next 5 days, this has a medium, moderate chance of developing, a 40% chance of developing. Now, you're probably thinking that at least it's around 40% the chance of tropical cyclone formation, which seems like it's more potentially on the lower end of the moderate spectrum. However, I want you guys to keep in mind that I'd say it's more likely than not that the chance will increase as this heads further westward, because once the National Hurricane Center becomes more confident that the conditions will be more favorable beyond the 5-day mark from now, then we should see that chance of a tropical cyclone increase potentially into 50 to 60%, and potentially maybe into the high end later during the week. So despite the fact that it's around 40% right now, don't underestimate the possibility that we could see Tropical Storm Danielle within the next 5 days, because I think there is a pretty good possibility we could see that chance increase. So we're gonna need to pay close attention to that. But right now, there is a moderate chance of Tropical Storm Danielle developing within the next 5 days. So it's suddenly something to pay close attention to now, right around the Caribbean, since it is pretty much going to move close to you guys. So you need to pay close attention to that. Now, taking a look at the water vapor imagery, we do see that this is our disturbance we're watching right now, and we do see a lot of convection going on around the center of circulation at this time. However, this convection isn't really organized. There isn't a high amount of rotational vorticity around the center of circulation, as you see that the clusters of thunderstorms are pretty much scattered. There isn't really one well-defined, very small center of circulation for this to, of course, enhance its wind speed and to have a good or any chance of developing into Tropical Storm Danielle within the next few hours. But that's expected to change as it heads further westward once it encounters a little bit more of a conducive environment, and once the thunderstorm activity does begin to organize itself to where this will likely develop a small center of circulation as it heads further westward, and has a good possibility of developing into Tropical Storm Danielle. And in terms of the amount of stable air, we do see a decent amount of stable air just to the west of this thunderstorm activity, but you see that it's far to the northwest and it isn't really getting entrained in this thunderstorm activity, which is a key thing that tropical cyclones, of course, need for a higher amount of convection to occur. So as of right now, it seems like conditions are conducive enough for this to organize, but there are several uncertainties regarding the stability in the atmosphere, as well as the amount of upper level winds that are going to be over this storm. Now, if I were to show you guys a GFS model over the next 5 days when it comes to the relative humidity within it, right around the mid levels of the atmosphere, we do see that while there is a lot of dry air, like I said, just to the northwest of this area of convection, we do see that it's still shielded for the most part by a high amount of moisture, which is preventing a lot of dry air from entraining this low pressure system, which is the reason why the GFS model believes that this low pressure system will develop into a tropical storm, where we do see the pressure drop down to 1,004 millibars. And while we do see just a little bit of dry air entraining the western portion of this storm, you see that it isn't a highly concentrated area of stable air, as you see that while the air is definitely drier, it isn't so dry to a point where it's completely diminishing any convection from occurring in the center of circulation, and there is just enough moisture that's shielding this center of circulation from really entraining a lot of this dry air. So as a result, it's able to strengthen, or at least maintain its strength, despite the existence of dry air just to the northwest of it. And we do see that this does strengthen quite a bit. It won't necessarily be an extremely strong tropical storm, but it certainly is a tropical storm at this time. But we do see that as if I were to continue to move forward beyond the 5-day mark, it does encounter a little bit more stability surrounding it, which is slowing it down a little bit, which is definitely the hope. And we do see that the storm does move north, very northwest of the Caribbean as well, but there's still uncertainty regarding the track also, because I still think that there is a possibility this moves further southward than expected. So that could put potentially the Caribbean islands, potentially Puerto Rico, at risk if this were to take a track further southward. So we're going to need to pay close attention to how this ridge builds in the middle of the Atlantic to really determine the track. If I were to show you guys the height anomaly, the 500 millibar height anomaly, which pretty much represents the air pressure between the right around the mid-lows of the atmosphere. If I were to move forward with that, we do see a ridge, but we also see a weakness in ridging just to the east of it, and a dip in and a trough right around the eastern half of the United States. Now, that's pretty much going to be the main factor that's going to try to steer northward. If this ridge is a little stronger, then we should expect a track for southward, and potentially a little bit stronger if it were to take the southern track as well, because then it'll avoid a lot of the Saharan dust and the stable air that's a little bit further northward. And of course, the sea surface temperatures will be a little bit warmer if it were to take the southern track. So we're going to need to pay close attention to how this ridge builds over the next 5 days to really determine if this will move southward and potentially be more of a threat to the Caribbean. But we do see that small ridge right here, but a big trough right here that's steering it northward. And we do see, and based on what the GFS model is stating, while it does expect this low pressure system to develop into a tropical storm, the GFS model does expect it to fizzle out by the time it reaches the Caribbean. But at this point, there's still a high amount of uncertainty. The reason why the GFS model wants to fizzle this out is because of the amount of dry air, and there isn't a high amount of instability surrounding the center circulation, which is slowing it down a little bit. But there is potentially that possibility that the dry air could be less than average, and it also depends on the track. Like I said, if this moves southward, then it'll avoid more of that dry air, but we're just gonna need to wait and see how this ridge builds. But what I could say with confidence is that that at least a well-defined low pressure system will exist in the main development region. What's a little bit more uncertain is if this will develop into a tropical storm. At this point, it seems like the upper level winds will go in its favor, because we do see that it's going to be right in the middle of this upper level high, so it's going to avoid the stronger upper level winds just to the north and south of it, which should allow the thunderstorm activity surrounding the low pressure system to organize itself a little bit more. But we do see, as this moves northward, the wind shear will increase, which is another reason why the GFS model wants to fizzle this out in the long-term future. But for the short-term future, it seems like the GFS model does believe that there won't be enough dry air and the wind shear will be light enough that a tropical storm will develop. Now, the European model isn't necessarily agreeing with it, because while the European model does expect a well-defined low pressure system to develop in the main developed region, the European model doesn't necessarily want to develop a tropical storm out of this. And if it does, it's a very weak tropical storm, because we do see that this low pressure system's millibar pressure ranges around the 1,000, the low 1,010 mark, which shows that it's a very weak tropical wave. And we do see that it doesn't really strengthen much more than that, pretty much, as it pretty much just hovers around the 1,010 millibar range. But we do see that the wind shear is light enough. But what the European model does differently than the GFS model is the amount of stable air, as it expects a lot more dry air to be an inhibiting factor for the low pressure system, where we do see a much higher amount of dry air just to the north of it. If we were to compare the GFS and the European model side by side, you see that in the European model, while there is a decent amount of moisture, we do see a strong amount of dry air just to the north of it. Compare that to the GFS model, where you see that there's a much higher area where the relative humidity is much higher, and we do see that convection surround this low pressure system all around. So We're going to need to see which one will be the correct one. Both want to develop a low pressure system, at least in the main developed region. But the European model is expecting more stable air than the GFS model. So we're going to need to pay close attention to the amount of dry air just to the north of this low pressure system over the next several hours to really determine the fate of this low pressure system, which at this point is a little bit uncertain if this will develop into tropical storm or not. Now, another thing I want to show you guys is the ensemble members. We do see that based on what the spaghetti models of the GFS model is stating, we do see that there is a large range where the spaghetti models move towards where we do see a decent amount of them wanting to take a southern track, which would be a little bit more of a concern for the Caribbean. But we do see a decent amount of them take a northern track and stays just to the north enough to stay out of trouble in the Caribbean, which would definitely be the best case scenario. And it would be a weaker storm also if this were to take a northern track because of cooler sea surf temperatures, the enhanced amount of wind shear it would experience a little bit further northward, and the enhanced amount of dry air it would experience a little bit northward. So still a lot of time to really narrow down where exactly this will go. But it seems like it's going to move west-northwest, but it gets a bit more uncertain beyond the 5-day mark. So we're going to need to pay close attention to how this ridge builds in, right around the middle of the Atlantic. Now, here's my forecast for Tropical Storm Danielle within the next 5 days. So, of course, there is a moderate chance Tropical Storm Danielle develops within the next 5 days. Again, really, I think the key thing will be the amount of dry air. So we're going to need to pay close attention to that. And pretty much it's the same track I made in my last video, as there hasn't really been much of a change when it comes to the projected path of this tropical wave. So at least in the Caribbean, you still need to pay close attention to that, because there's still that possibility this could move southward. So make sure to pay close attention to that. But yeah, guys, I guess that's it for this video. I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more about the content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.